Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How are you all doing today? And today I have a gentleman out from the West Coast. His name is Brian Clune. And Brian is a historian, and he is the co-founder of Planet Paranormal. And he's also an author of California's Historic Haunts and Ghosts of the Queen Mary. His love of history has led him to volunteer at both the USS Iowa and Fort MacArthur Military Museum. His involvement with Planet Paranormal has led him to be involved with many TV shows, including Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, The Dead Files, and My Ghost Story. And he was also the focus of a companion documentary for the film Paranormal Asylum. So how are you doing this evening, Brian?
I am doing absolutely fantastic. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to correct you on my last name. It's Clune, not
Oh, I'm
Clooney.
sorry. I'm giving you that hearty at the end. I'm sorry.
Absolutely not a problem. In French, it's means clown, so we won't even go there.
Okay. Really does it? Or are you kidding? Is it? I don't know. I took high school French, but I never got into the clown part. I'm thinking, is he serious? No, it's not. Really?
Yeah, I'm not kidding. I don't know. There's a show called Baskets. It's Baskets the Clown. And they had a promo that had him saying, "You are not a clown. You will never be a clown."
Oh,
and he was
God.
saying clown. So
okay.
It's like, okay.
That's like the Pink Panthers, you minky? Okay. All right. Let me...
Uh-huh.
All right. So, Brian, one of the things that I always ask my guests, that are involved, of course, in the paranormal is what propelled you into the paranormal? Was it something that happened to you as a child? Was it as an adult? What happened?
Well, my father died when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And I kind of grew. He stayed around until my mother passed in '87.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really. I had a couple experiences when I was a kid, but nothing that ever really stuck with me.
Okay.
And then a few years ago, when my oldest son turned 18, we kind of started to drift apart. Him and I spent a lot of time in the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
I was still in the Boy Scouts with my other son and my nephew.
Okay.
So it didn't leave a whole lot of time for me to spend with my oldest son. So I asked him if there was something we could do together, and he said, "Let's go ghost hunting." At which point I was seriously thinking about sending him to a shrink.
It's like, what? All right. It's like...
Yeah. Well, he talked me into it, and I found Planet Paranormal, and it just kind of went from there.
Okay. And obviously it did take off with you because I imagine you stayed involved with it, even if beyond just trying to spend time with your son, right? Because it looks like...
Exactly.
And what was it about it? Did you have some type of experience once you started going out there with him, or what was it about it?
No.
Okay.
It was, I was having fun with him,
Mm-hmm.
but I also clicked with the people in the team itself. Planet Paranormal was always a very small team.
Okay.
There were actually only 4 of us, 3 when I began. And then, well, I should say 5 because of my son.
Right.
And we just all clicked. And I was having so much fun going out and at that time I was just thinking urban exploring.
Right.
And then something happened. I had my first experience, which was on board the Queen Mary.
Okay.
And I've been hooked ever since.
Okay, that's what it takes. One time that, and I've told that sometimes things happen to you that even if you don't necessarily capture it, if you have that experience, that firsthand experience where it's like, I know what I felt or what I saw or whatever, it's like, okay, so if I didn't capture it, but I know what, you're convinced, and that's all it takes. Like something goes off that you have that, what do I call it? That coming to Jesus moment where you say, I get it now. I really do get it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the first experience I had was rather amusing. I had been with the team for maybe 7, 8. The first 3 months, because I'd be walking around another place we were investigating, just going, yeah, I'm not getting anything. Nope, nothing. And so they would start mimicking me. And the night that I had my first real experience, I was walking down this little narrow short corridor to get into the change rooms in the pool.
Okay.
The Queen Mary First Class pool. And the rest of the team was at the very end of the pool, completely opposite from where I am. And as I was halfway through this corridor, I just get this in my ear. And I could feel my earlobe vibrate.
Oh my God.
I kind of stopped, and it's a ghost that we've nicknamed Grumpy, obviously.
Okay.
So I kind of stopped, I turn around, and I walked out. Of course, they say I ran, but I will never admit to that. But by the time I got out, they were busy literally laughing so hard, a couple of them were on the floor. And
had they had that experience, or
I'm sorry, what was it? They heard Grumpy growl at me.
Oh my! So they're like, here he comes.
Yeah, so when I came out of the change room, they knew that I was going to be a little different, shall we say? So it was, and they will never they keep saying that was my dude run moment.
Wow. And I know that, that the Queen Mary has, from what I hear, it's like Grand Central Station. It's got ghosts and from everywhere, and but they've got some that are very well known in certain parts of the ship that a lot of people have experienced it. And I heard also that the pool area is the most active area on the ship. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say the most active, but I would say the most active that you can get to.
Okay.
And she's the best known spirit on the ship.
Okay.
And she does like to hang out in the first class pool area, but we've captured her voice. So the spirits on the ship do tend to wander around, and we don't know what their reality is. So
right,
they could just be wandering the ship, thinking they're on a cruise.
Yeah, for all we know, that's the way they see it.
Yeah.
They're on a perpetual cruise.
Exactly. I mean, that might be where I go when I finally pass.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? At the end of the day, we really don't know. It's only so much. We only kind of get a glimpse every now and again.
Exactly.
Do you think that there's any ghosts there that have just, for lack of a better word, are hitchhikers? They really didn't either die or work on that ship, but they've ended up haunting it. Do you think that's the case?
It's quite possible. I don't know if you're familiar with Peter. He did a show.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, he's also the one that did the Sally case.
Yes,
in,
right, the Sally
Kansas.
House, right. Mm-hmm.
Right. He claims that there are a minimum of 600 spirits on board the ship, but even he said that there are most likely more.
Wow.
And we've run into spirits on there that we can't really place as far as a timeline. So it is quite possible that people just have migrated to the ship after passing for whatever reason.
That's a lot.
Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. I mean, because I know that besides being an ocean liner and you get your own drama going on there, but during the war, I mean, it was used for so many things that you could see definitely how it would end up with some type of intelligent or active haunting. And Brian, it sounds like, you've been out there a while. Have you seen any type of rhythm or timing as far as the hauntings where there's a period of more activity versus where it slacks off, or is it kind of constant all across?
It's fairly constant. However, the period between October 31st and December 9th, which coincides with the exact timeline of the ship's final voyage, final cruise, seems to be the most active period on the ship.
Really?
So, yeah, we tell people, and you can actually book your own investigations on the ship now.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually fantastic. I mean, a team can go in, get their own investigation, and there's no general public. It's just your team, a security guard, and the paranormal ambassador, Matt Schultz, who takes you around all the different areas. Yeah, it's fantastic. So when people ask us, well, when should we do it? We always kind of give them that timeline.
Okay.
Because that's the best time to actually be able to catch evidence. Not to say you're absolutely going to.
Right.
But,
I know. That's not an on-demand thing. It's
you have your best shot. Right.
Exactly. And that and that's the thing. And I'm glad they did that because a lot of places, if you've got a lot of ambient noise and you got people trucking around, forget it. You could just you're not. It's much more difficult.
It gets difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the thing that's nice about the investigation is they tell you all of the different areas of the ship that are normally off limits to the general public, and they will take you down there.
Wow, that's good. That's excellent, as a matter of fact.
So it's really cool. So if you ever want to come out to California and
you know what, when
my son was stationed on the Queen Mary, let us know.
My son was stationed out there on Coronado Island when he was in the Navy, and at that time. I would go out there a lot, and I have a good friend of mine that lives up in Merced, but I haven't been there in a few years, and I've been thinking about it, but it's like, before when I had a kid out there, which was my youngest, I'd go out there a lot. And then now that I think about it, I could kick myself for not having gone while I was there. But yeah, I've thought about it.
You've never been to the Queen Mary?
No, I mean, and I was there. I was in San Diego. I was so close. I went to San Francisco, but always, my time was always limited. I didn't get around to it. And now it's like, oh, Marlene, why didn't you? But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, just remember the ship itself is also a hotel. So
yeah, I've seen that they're actually like you book a room kind of deal.
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great way to see the ship, definitely.
And let me ask something, Brian. Since you've gone there, and have you had come across any entities that, besides this guy that growled in your ear, which has got to be pretty disquieting, have you ever come across anything that you felt like, what is this? Like, because I think when you start doing paranormal investigations, you kind of develop this threshold for something to really put you back on your heels. I mean, you're used to the cold spots.
Not at the Queen Mary, no. And that's one of the things that I've always found a little surprising is with the amount of spirits that are reported to be on the Queen Mary, we have never run up against anything that we think is harmful, that we think means to do people harm.
Okay.
Some other locations, yes, but the Queen Mary, never. And that was one of the reasons why we were kind of upset about the Ghost Adventures episode when they were on the Queen Mary, is they made everything out to be evil and demons, and
I know.
It was just kind of like, ugh.
I know, and I think that the D word's overused personally. It's like, what? Everything ends up being the D word, demon. It's like, no, come on. And I tell
exactly.
You know what? I've been doing investigations since the 1990s, long before it became the reality TV thing. And I tell people, you know what? You can run across an entity that was a really bad person in life. And if for whatever reason they're still a discarnate, and they can be really bad. They don't have to be a demon. It could be a human entity that will that you really don't want, will give you almost that sixth sense that you have, like that danger that you're in the presence of something that's really negative. And it doesn't have to be a demon. It could just be a regular human being that was just a bad person, and they're still a bad or angry or violent person after death.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing that Peter James was always saying, was that a person who was nice will be a ghost who is nice. Mm-hmm. A person who was mean and nasty is going to be the same after they die, and they'll be a mean and nasty ghost.
Yeah.
He says that, your personality doesn't change just because you've passed to a different realm.
Right. You don't grow wings all of a sudden. On the contrary, if you were like a violent or angry individual, or for some reason you don't want to be that, God, yeah, you just don't become a nice person. And I think that's why I'm saying that sometimes investigators will run across either a communication or a feeling, or actually see something, or and they just because it's negative, or I'm going to use the word malevolent, they immediately think non-human. And I'm thinking, not really. Right. There's plenty of humans running out there, even after death, that are like, you wouldn't want to, anywhere near them, much less in a dark place, which is where a lot of paranormal investigations take place.
Right, exactly. I mean, and like we just had Charles Manson pass away.
Oh my God, yes.
I really don't think that you're going to get a good feeling if you run across his spirit.
No, absolutely not.
But
I mean, besides the fact that he was, and you know what? And when you look at a personality like that, you think how much of this is mental illness and how much of this is really evil, pure evil.
I did a lot of research on Manson for my newest book.
Okay.
And the thing that's really scary about Manson was the fact that he was very intelligent. He never finished school, but he was a very intelligent person, and he used that intelligence to sway people. And he actually learned how to sway people while in prison, which is really kind of scary. Mm-hmm. So,
and it makes you think. Most people, when you look back, you think to yourself, how could anybody talk you into basically following them to the point of killing other humans on their behalf, which is what he ultimately did, amongst other things that he would get people to do for him. And I'm sure it doesn't work on everybody.
It's actually, I think a lot of his followers had to, I'm not going to say had to have had a weak mind, but maybe a weak spirit. That,
right.
It's like they were looking for something, and Manson just filled it at the time.
Yeah, they were. It was like the other day, of course, because when he died, everybody that day they were talking constantly about him and all his followers. And I can't remember where I was saying that most of these followers, even though they came from middle-class families, all of them, in their background, they had some type of either family crisis, molestation, abuse. They had something in their background, like you said, that doesn't automatically make you, but maybe some personalities, it just makes them easier, or like you said, more willing to run across a Manson personality, and they believe it. They're looking either for an authority figure, whatever you want to call it, and the next thing you got stuff like what happened there, which is incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember about a year ago, no, it was more, a couple of years ago, I was up in the Moundsville Penitentiary, which is where he's originally from. And they had a note on there that at one point he had tried to transfer. He wanted to transfer back to be transferred to the Moundsville Penitentiary because he wanted to be close to his family. And the warden there said, "Nope, thanks, but you are too notorious." In other words, any prison that had to house him, it was going to be too much trouble, and they turned down his request.
Well, I know when he was being released from Terminal Island Penitentiary, which is really close to my house.
Wow.
He had actually asked the warden and the prison system not to be released.
Really?
He said that he felt more comfortable in prison, and prison was more of a home to him than the outside, and he didn't believe he could make it on the outside, and they turned him down. So he then requested of his at his parole hearing that he be allowed to go up to the San Francisco Bay Area, and he convinced them that because of the whole summer of love and peace and all of that, that would be good for him. And basically all that did was give him a captive audience to sway people to his psychotic beliefs.
Yep. And it's incredible sometimes how certain things turn out the way they do just based on the timing.
Yeah. And what's even more scary is he actually has more followers today than he did back then.
I heard that. And I was like, what is wrong?
Yeah, I don't understand. I mean, I've been to the Spawn Ranch area, and the police will actually tell you, you know what, you might not want to go there because there are a lot of his followers that show up. And so I started to do a little research on that, and it is absolutely amazing. He's probably got 5 or 6 times more now than he did back then. Scary.
And to me, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so basically you're following someone who was a proponent of massacring people. And because this is the thing, sometimes murders are carried out, but there's revenge, or in other words, there was some type of tie between the parties where they either hated you, or it was love, I hate you now, or revenge. So there's some type of dynamic there, but he didn't know these people. None of them knew. I mean, in other words, it's the killing for the sake of killing.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the reason that he picked the Tate residence was because of Terry Melcher. So he had gone there a few days before looking for Melcher. Right. But Melcher had moved out.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you about. I had heard something that I didn't know that he already knew ahead of time that he wasn't there. I thought that he still thought he was there.
No, he knew he wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
But he was trying to start a race war. And he just decided, all right, I know that these are wealthy families, and I'm just going to go ahead, since I know where the house is. I know it's secluded. I know it'll be an easy mark to. So he went ahead and sent his followers there. The La Bianca residence, he knew it was a wealthy neighborhood and knew where it was because he had been to a party a few months earlier at one of the neighbors' house. And so he just picked that at random because he kind of knew where it was.
Right, he was scoping it out, yeah.
Right. And all of these people, it kind of drives me crazy. Oh, well, Manson never killed anybody. Manson never did this. Manson never did that. Well, Manson was the first one into the La Bianca house by himself, tied them up, and then brought his followers in.
Of course. I mean...
So, he was so culpable in it. He tried to kill lots of Papa Crow, a drug dealer. He actually shot him and thought he had killed him. So, I mean, it's like the guy was not innocent.
Well...
It drives me crazy when people say he was.
And this is the thing. It's like... if what you're trying to say is he didn't kill him because he wasn't capable, no, he was just trying to get ahead of the curve and get somebody else to do the dirty work in case it ever came to anything. He could say, it wasn't me. It wasn't because he wasn't capable of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking to myself, how could you stand there and watch to see somebody killed and slaughtered that way? I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, he didn't think it was violent enough.
Yeah,
which is even more scary.
And it makes you wonder how, because I was reading that after the Tate LaBianca murders, before they had captured them, they were looking that how Roman Polanski had finished the Rosemary's Baby movie, and they were saying that when he was filming that, he had gotten threats from some quasi Satanist kind of deal, and they were thinking, was that the origin of where this had come from? And of course, later on, they caught the Manson people. But I think somewhere along the line, somebody was realizing whoever had done this was really, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but it wasn't just killing. It was just that wholesale slaughter, that torture, that sadistical edge over it.
Well, even when the Mansons were arrested, they were not arrested for the murders. They still didn't know they had anything to do with it.
What was it?
It wasn't until it was destruction of public property was the reason that they were arrested at Barker Ranch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that.
They had been looking for their bottomless pit to hide out in during the race war, and just decided to destroy a couple pieces of construction equipment that they didn't realize or didn't care that they were still being used by the Park Service. And that's why they were arrested. They still didn't know anything about the murders until Susan Adkins decided to start bragging about it once she was in jail.
There you go. What? And what was it? There was one of them that just came up for parole like maybe 2 months ago, right before he died, and they turned her down. I can't remember what her name, which one of them.
If I remember right, that was Krenwinkel.
Right, okay. And
I could be wrong on that, but I think it was Krenwinkel.
And they
I get a lot of them confused. So.
Well, no, the thing is that you look at them, like you look at these pictures of when they were arrested when they were really young, and now you look at them and it's like, you might look like an older, nicer lady, but I'm sorry. There's just something that I wouldn't want to find out if you would be capable of doing it if you were out in the world again.
Exactly. One of the things that's kind of interesting, getting back to kind of the paranormal, as far as the whole Manson thing goes. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of David Oman?
Yes, I've interviewed David.
Oh, have you? Okay, because I was going to say he actually opens up his house to allow people to come in and investigate, which I think is really kind of cool.
No,
that he does that. So,
well, I remember he was telling me that, when he bought that lot, because I asked him, I said, David, was there ever any structure there where you built your house? I said, nope, it was just an empty lot, and his dad, which was a builder, got it at a real good price, and it was one of those things that, it was so close to the location of where this took place, but by the time he had bought it, it was already after the time that they had demolished the house, and they had changed the address, and they built another structure on it. So yeah,
right.
And but yeah, it's
either built his house together. So.
Right, they're like it's a very but I know what he explained was that the lots are pretty close to each other as far as when you go up that road. I mean, I've never been there physically, but from what he was describing,
it is. Well, if this is going to sound kind of funny, but if you look at the cover of Hollywood Obscura,
yes,
you can see the row of houses where David's house is, and I actually snapped that picture from Falcon's Lair, which is really kind of cool because Falcon's Lair is right across the street from David's house.
Okay. I mean, as a matter of fact, because I have a slide with some of your book covers, and I was going to ask you about that book that you came out with Atlas Obscura, which sounds so interesting.
Yeah, it's got a lot of old stuff in it, but there's a lot of new stuff in it as well. I know just recently some English author came out and said that she knows who killed the Black Dahlia.
What?
But it's I did so much research when I was writing the Black Dahlia piece, and none of what she is saying occurred I could find any trace of. So I don't know where she came up with it, but to be perfectly honest with you, and I'm not claiming that I did it. It was an FBI profiler and a retired Los Angeles Times investigative reporter, and I'm pretty sure that they nailed who the killer of the Black Dahlia is.
Let me ask
and
you.
It's actually in the book.
Let me ask you then, is it, and the thing, it's then not Dr. Hodel? Or is that what you're saying?
No, you know what? No, Hoder. No,
Hoder, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Hoder just hated his father. I mean, if you take a look at the picture that he puts up and claims, and you put it next to a picture of Elizabeth Short, it is so obviously not the same woman.
Okay.
Hoder grew up literally hating his father. They use the Enos house, which is a famous movie location, as the house where she was murdered, and it's just like, no. I'm not going to go into it, but I do put a timeline and all of the reasons for it's a man by the name of Walter Alonzo Bailey, who and this is my own personal belief, but I am 99% sure he is most likely the one who killed Elizabeth.
Okay.
But I detail what Hirsch and the FBI profiler came up with.
Right.
And if you read what they say, it's pretty obvious that he is most likely the killer. And one of the reasons that he never got caught is he died of Alzheimer's a year after the murder.
Really?
Yeah. So I mean,
was he
there's just so many different.
Was he when he had premature Alzheimer's?
No, he was an older gentleman. He had a connection to the Short family. His office was right around the corner from the whole thing just falls into place.
Really, I gotta see. I'm always like, because it's incredible. And let me ask you: do you think, besides that, also, because I've heard, without doing like what it sounds like you've done, which is deep research on it, do you think that part of the problem why nobody was caught was also that the police didn't handle it the right way as far as investigation was concerned?
It's quite possible. But until Hirsch did something rather unusual and actually had to check ownership of property in the Lemert Park area, there was nothing connecting Bailey. Nothing.
Okay.
So
I see what you're saying.
He was never even on the radar.
Right. So even if the police work would have been excellent, there was still no connection for them to tie him to the murder or suspect him of anything. I see what you're saying.
Exactly. And then the fact that they were receiving hundreds of confessions daily.
Really?
Now, granted, they were throwing most of them out because they could tell which ones were not even close to credible. The ones that were even remotely credible, they had to follow up on. So they were, they just had this deluge that they had to wade through as far as all these people. And then because the murder itself resembled the torso killings in Chicago, they were investigating the possibility that murderer came to L.A. And
right.
I really don't blame the police for not being able to pick up on who it was.
Well, yeah, you always hear that I understand there's only so many ways that you can stretch a police force as far as manpower, and forensics back then were not what we have now with DNA and all that other stuff.
Not even close. I will tell you the one thing though that is the saddest part of the Black Dahlia story is what the the Herald did to Elizabeth Short's mother. They had called her the day after the body was found,
right,
and told her that Elizabeth had just won a beauty pageant.
Oh no!
And started asking her all kinds of personal questions because they needed it for the story.
Oh my God!
So her mother, was just all happy and telling them, "Oh yeah, she was this," and then at the very end of the interview, they said, "Oh, we do have some bad news, though. We just wanted to make sure that you were comfortable." So was actually murdered.
God, let me tell you something. I don't know how anybody could actually do that to somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to me, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah. I mean, it just shows a callousness that I can't even comprehend.
No, I can't either. And let me ask you, this guy that you're telling me that you think, do you think was there any evidence that if he ever committed any similar murders to that, or was this an isolated incident?
It was an isolated incident, and they even have a theory for why it happened. And they basically don't really blame him for a conscious act either.
Really?
It's kind of it had to do with his Alzheimer's, his family situation, the stresses on him. Not that that's an excuse, mind you. Mm-hmm. It's just, they came up with a whole comprehensive reason for why it happened.
Because and that's the thing. I think that when everybody sees what was done to the body, post-mortem, everybody's always thinking, okay, somebody with medical expertise, somebody sadomasochistic, psychopath, blah, blah, blah. And,
well, he was a prominent surgeon.
But I guess that's the part where I think people, you know what? Especially back in those days, sometimes, especially doctors, people didn't want they weren't looked that hard as far as when crimes like that were committed, because you were a doctor. So
right, you were an upstanding citizen. Exactly. We're not going to look at you. Yeah.
Or not look at you that hard anyway. Or if not, you're going to call the mayor's office or something along those lines, and then it'll come down on us. So yeah.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. It would be great at some point to ever conclusively know who was the one that did that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know 100%. As I said earlier, for me, having done the research and looked at a bunch of different theories of who, what, why, this is the only one that actually makes sense.
Right.
Which is why it's the only one I put in the chapter. To me, I'm pretty certain that he's the one that did it. But, the reader has to make up their own mind.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I saw that you also, I think, include in your book something about Thelma Todd's garage.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, do you have any theories on who killed her?
My theory is that it was just a tragic accident.
You think so?
Yeah. Unless there was a giant conspiracy between the police, Roland West, and the coroner's office, she could not have been killed outside of the garage and still had the carbon monoxide in her system. Okay. However, that being said, the possible curse of the Joyita still kind of has me going, that's kind of weird. It's one of the things I put in the book. Roland West owned a yacht, called the MV Joyita.
Okay.
And him and Thelma used to take it over to Catalina.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the theories that came out was that Roland West killed her on the boat, brought her back to the garage, put her in the Lincoln, started the motor, closed the door, and walked away.
Okay.
But again, unless there was a giant conspiracy trying to protect Roland West, the carbon monoxide would not have been in her bloodstream.
Okay.
However, after Thelma died, and I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but a lot of weird stuff went on with the MV Joyita, which the ship itself actually became known as the Mary Celeste of the Pacific.
You're kidding.
No. So, it's kind of like, all right, well, this is a bit weird. But it's really a cool tale, to be perfectly honest with you.
Now, I've heard that Thelma Todd or something's going on there at that cafe she used to have. Have you heard anything about anything going on there?
Well, the cafe was haunted, and Thelma was seen in both the casual dining area downstairs and the more exclusive Joya's room, which was upstairs, and then also seen in the third floor, which was her apartment.
Right.
And even after the Sidewalk Cafe was sold, it became Paulist Productions. They were even reporting having seen Thelma wandering around. But I will tell you one thing: I would love to go up there right now because they have completely gutted it.
Yeah.
They are completely redoing it, and I just want to go in because it's a well-known theory that during major conversions and construction, that activity ramps up, and I would just love to find out. I was just past there about 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And my wife was like laughing at me because I was drooling, thinking about going there.
Believe me, I've done the exact same thing where I'm like, oh, I would give anything to go in there and do this and do that. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes kicks up the paranormal activity is exactly when you've got that type of demolition going on inside and things are being, it's like the spirit is like not happy about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's kind of sad in a way that it does. They've already changed the outside, so the structure itself is the same, but the facade and everything is now changed, so it doesn't even look like the same building really, which is kind of sad in a way.
Yeah, because you want to think that they're going to keep that. Yeah, because it was from, I want to say what many people call the golden age of Hollywood, and where the stars, they were sometimes they were presented in the public in one way, even though they had all these things going on and behind the scenes in their personal lives. But
exactly.
And the reason why I asked you because I was I think there was even a theory that since what was it that she had wasn't she involved also with Lucky Luciano or something? I mean, they were thinking as like,
no,
was it a mob hit? That they wanted to take over her cafe as a casino. I mean, it was like a roster of people that wanted that. You think, well, why would they do this to her? And she's very beautiful, but my God, she just was not lucky in love at all.
No, not really. Well, now she did. Head over heels was in love with Roland West. Roland West, however, looked at her more as a little sister. So it was kind of an unrequited thing with Roland West. However, he did love her quite a bit, just not the way she had hoped.
Right.
But as far as Lucky Luciano goes, Lucky Luciano never once set foot in California.
Really?
Ever. Yeah. And there's there's a big story about how said, I want to use the second floor as a gambling casino. We can make a lot of money. And her response was, is over my dead body. And he said, well, that can be arranged. But like I said, though, the problem is Luciano never came to California, ever. And both the Thelma Todd piece and the piece I did on Bugsy Siegel, I did quite a bit of research into Luciano as well.
Okay.
So, and again, nothing ever came up about that other than a couple tales about Luciano's one that killed Thelma Todd. But again, that's just people are always trying to figure out why their heroes have passed. And I think it's just a case of that.
Right. And I mean, there was a lot of, and it's like, like everything, especially when you have a starlet and she's so famous and so beautiful and everything, and then this happens. And, people sometimes would find it hard to believe that a person like this, which looks like they have everything, would commit suicide. And that's where you get all the theories going.
Right, but again, I don't believe she committed suicide.
No,
I believe she just didn't know any better.
And what was it? Because, and you tell me, because obviously you've done, it was something that, from what I understand, was that she had come back from being out at night with some friends, having dinner, and it was really cold, and she had gone up and knocked, and that Roland didn't let her in. And supposedly that's when she goes back to her car that was in the garage, I guess, to keep warm.
Correct. Now, Roland, he had an apartment at the cafe, but he actually lived in a mansion above the cafe, and that's where the garage was as well. Right. Was just below the mansion.
Right.
Thelma had been out at the Trocadero with a party for the Lupinos. And she was supposed to have been home by 2:00 because that's when Roland was going to close up the cafe.
Right.
She was late. And apparently he forgot that she only had one key with her, and he locked both locks.
Okay.
So when she got home, she couldn't get in because he had locked both locks, and she only had the key for the bottom lock.
Okay.
So she made her way up this really long flight of stairs. I've seen those stairs. I'm like, I ain't going up that. To the garage, and it was December 16th, so it was pretty cold in Malibu.
Okay.
And she climbed into her Lincoln, started the car, and with the garage door closed, and most likely passed out because she was rather drunk.
Yeah. Right.
And like I said, I think it was just a case of accidental death. That's my own personal belief.
Yeah. And sometimes it's and that's again where people think you die just out of plain ignorance or stupidity, that kind of deal. That like, wow.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I do in the book is I don't make any concrete assumptions unless it's a well-known fact of how somebody passed away. And in the case of Thelma, I do, I leave it up to the reader to decide. I try and give all the different stories. The same with George Reeves. I don't say I believe this or
right.
I don't believe that. I just try and give the facts and let the reader decide for themselves.
Yeah, because it's like a big open question mark. You really don't know. That's what it looks like. It could have been something else. Again, without concrete proof, it's like you said, it's likely to remain a mystery because most of those players are dead. Everybody that was around at that time has long since taken the dirt nap. So,
yeah, that's exactly true. Yes.
And I saw that you also wrote another book, Haunted San Pedro. And
correct.
What is what's going on there as far as do they have any well-known haunted locations or not so well-known? Because I think sometimes those are the most interesting ones.
Well, the well-known ones, I'm going to assume people have heard of these. The USS Iowa.
Yes.
Which I'm a volunteer security on board. And they don't really like us talking about the spirits on the ship, but the spirits on board the Iowa are very helpful. They're again nothing scary, nothing that's going to harm you. They actually have been known to help out the crew, especially the ops crew, when they're trying to repair the ship and things like that.
Okay.
The Banning Mansion, some people may have heard of that. Phineas Banning is probably one of the most famous people in California. His house is, his mansion is supposedly haunted. The Drum Barracks, which is an old Civil War fort, which is where they brought the camels. I don't know if you're familiar with the Camel Corps.
No. I mean, I think I had heard about it, but
yeah, they brought in a bunch of camels to see if they'd be good for the desert.
Okay.
And the camels pretty much ate everything in sight, so they got rid of them and just basically put them out in the desert.
It's like, okay, we got a big goat on our hands.
Yeah, exactly. And I've got a few interesting lighthouses, 2 lighthouses that are kind of the Point Furman Lighthouse and the Point Vicente Lighthouse. Fort MacArthur, I don't know how many people have heard of Fort MacArthur, but it was the key to the defense of the Los Angeles harbor from basically World War I until it finally closed in 84, if I remember correctly. I also used to be a volunteer there, so that was kind of cool.
You know,
but then I also kind of cheated a little bit on San Pedro.
What happened?
Instead of using the city proper, I used the old Rancho San Pedro, which was one of the largest ranchos in California. And it was also land grant given to somebody in California by the Mexican government.
Wow. It must have been a huge area.
Yeah, it actually was. But like I said, I wanted to include some of the more, at least locally famous areas. So I kind of threw that in there. And the Dominguez Rancho, which was the only, it was called the Battle of the Old Woman's Gun. And it was the only battle of the Mexican-American War that the Mexicans won, and they won it handily, even though they were outnumbered.
Why was it named that? I have to ask.
Well, the Mexicans had actually hidden some cannon on the property. And the property at that time was owned by an old woman. And she hid them in her barn, and so after the battle, they just dubbed it the Battle of the Old Woman's Gun, because she was standing there watching the battle as they wheeled the cannons out.
Why not? I just had to ask. I had to ask because I go, okay, where does this old lady figure in this?
It's actually really a cool story if you ever decide to look it up.
Yeah, I am. Absolutely, I am. And you know what? Those things that you're saying that you were doing, the security or the volunteer, I think that is from the paranormal aspect. That's absolutely how you really, really get to witness a lot of things that sometimes, just because you're there different days, different times, consistently, over a period of time, is usually when you actually get to see or witness or whatever stuff that's paranormal.
Well, one of the funniest things that happened on board the Iowa, there is a third deck down is called Broadway, and it's this very long corridor that spans between the number 3 turret in the back all the way up to the number 1 turret in the front of the ship. And we didn't have it open because we're still in the process of bringing the ship back to life. But we were running a tour down there, a private tour, And the two security officers, it was the security lead and another security officer. They had just finished the tour. They were still down on Broadway, and they had done their final sweep to make sure nobody was left behind. As they were climbing up the ladder, one of them looked back and he saw a sailor leaning against the bulkhead.
What?
And he called up to the other security officer and said, "Do you see that?" And the other security officer said, "Uh-huh." And then they both ran up the ladder to the second deck. Well, when they turned around, they looked down, and here comes the sailor up the ladder.
Oh.
So they ran as fast as they could up to the main deck, which is out in the sunlight, turned around, and they didn't see the sailor. So they walk up to the other two security officers, one of which was me, and we looked at them, and the other security officer looks at them and he goes, "What, you guys see a ghost?" and I quote, that's all either one of them could say. And we both just started cracking up.
I bet. You know what?
I mean, literally, neither one of them could talk. Just
so were any of anyone? So who was the next one that volunteered to go down there?
Me.
Okay.
I was kind of running down there, but unfortunately, I didn't see anything. I was like, darn it.
But you know what? It's bad enough that you see the ghost, but then he's following you. Oh, my God.
Yeah. Well, he might have just been giving him an escort, you know.
Let me tell you.
Yeah, it was just really funny the way neither one of them could get a word out.
It's like, I bet they must have been like, how does he know? No, he's just, and it's like, and the thing is, like what you said, both of them saw this thing.
Yeah, both of them.
So it's like,
so it was, yeah, it was kind of cool. I just wish one of them would have been me. But
yeah. Let me ask you, has anybody ever said, apart from them, that they had seen the same sailor again before or after?
Well, there's actually a tale of somebody that has been dubbed Chief Roberts.
Okay.
And this is the only incident I know of where somebody has actually seen a spirit on the ship.
Okay.
But another story, one of and this was when the ship was up in Richmond, California. It had just been pulled out of mothballs, and we were trying to get it back into down to the Los Angeles harbor. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the ops guys, by the way, are the ones that do all the repairs on the ship.
Okay.
From the sail locker, and when he tried to grab one of the rungs on the ladder, his hand slipped off and he started to fall. Okay. And he felt somebody push him back up onto the ladder. Well, when he turned around to thank whoever it was, he realized that he was about 25 feet up in the air and there was nobody there.
Wow.
And so it was, everybody was saying, well, Chief Roberts was helping you out. People have lost tools, and they'll turn around and the tool will be there. So
it's a helpful spirit.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of funny because Chief Roberts, the story grew while the ship was still in service in the 80s.
Really?
Yeah, it was still an active Navy ship, and the chief was making himself known. But what's so odd is I've gone back through the crew records and we can find no Chief Roberts.
Okay, I was about to ask you, so did you why does everybody think it's Chief Roberts? Did you, did people finally say, hey, this looks like so-and-so, and then it's like, yeah, it is so-and-so?
Well, I think probably what happened is no one really knew who it was, so they just dubbed him Chief Roberts.
Chief Roberts.
That's the only thing I can think of, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's really kind of cool. And what I think is funny is, like I said, we're not really supposed to talk about the spirits and stuff, but I've noticed as I trail some of the tour groups when I'm making my rounds on the ship, that tour guides are actually starting to talk about some of the experiences that they've had on the ship.
Okay. Of course, everybody wants to hear it. It's like, I mean, let's face it. I mean, how long that ship was, what was it, from World War II onward? The USS
1943, okay. And then 91 is when it was mothballed, 1991.
Okay. All right.
And then she was the last of the U.S. battleships to be turned over to a museum ship.
Okay. And yeah, that, of course, I mean, so many things go on there in those ships. I mean, like I said, my son, he served on the USS Ronald Reagan. And, I mean, that's a much bigger ship. I mean, I know it's a huge, in comparison.
It's huge.
But still, it's like, people live their lives out in these ships, and you got all the emotions there. There's the joy, the heartbreak, whatever's going on. You're just living it out on a ship.
Yeah, well, it's like the USS Hornet, CV-12, which is based up in Alameda. Mm-hmm. I wrote about her for California's Historic Haunts.
Okay.
And she's got all kinds of activity on board. Okay. And the nice thing about that is the museum itself has fully embraced the ghosts.
Really?
Yeah, they have overnight investigations, and you can literally, I mean, they actually have paracons on the ship, the Gray Ghost Paracon.
Wow.
So they've fully embraced it. Now, the Iowa, to be fair to them, and one of the reasons that they don't really like speaking about the spirits, is the Iowa 47 is still way too fresh. That was the turret explosion back in 1989 that killed 47 sailors. Mm-hmm. And we actually have volunteers who were on board that day. So it's more of a we don't want to be insensitive to
right,
them.
Yeah. I understand totally what you're saying as far as out of respect because of what happened, and absolutely. Yeah, I could see what.
But when I was writing the chapter on the Iowa, I sat down with a couple of the higher ups, and we kind of went over what I had written, and they asked me to change a few things, and we kind of went back and forth. So they were very receptive.
Oh, that's good.
As far as allowing me to write about it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure most of them, it's like, it's like it's understandable. I totally understand like what you said, why they're kind of very careful about that. Absolutely. So let me tell you something. I have enjoyed this so much, Brian. Your stories are fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Like and of course the one that you just put out, the Hollywood Obscura, which is like I was saying, there was that time in Hollywood where so many things would go on behind the scenes, but they wanted to present the lifestyle of some of these stars or starlets a certain way, but in truth what was going on was so out there, and of course some of them met their ends in very unusual ways. I mean, Hollywood is full of mysteries, and whether you were a star or people just behind the scenes, there's a lot of
there were a few things that would make a gangster blush, that's for sure.
Yes. Especially those times when the studios own the stars, and they sign them up to these contracts. And, they kind of protected their investment at all costs, and just a lot of things went on there behind the scenes. And in other words, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say a lot of people don't realize that in the early days of Hollywood, stars wouldn't even have their names put on the movies.
Wow. It was all about the director and the production, huh?
Yeah. Well, that, and they didn't want to have to pay the stars any more money. And it was actually Carl Laemmle from Universal Studios, who finally opened up the star system.
Wow. Yeah.
So
I can imagine that. Yeah.
By the way, that's my next book. By the way.
Yeah.
The Haunted History of Universal Studios.
I bet there's plenty of it.
I guess, you have no idea.
No, the point I was trying to make was that all the circumstances, whether it's what's surrounding them or their lifestyle or the people that are involved, they're all fodder for most active hauntings that you come across. Tragedies, revenge, love life, gone wrong, weird people, as far as, the drugs, all that everything there is perfect to produce ghosts. So it's like, it's no surprise.
I'm telling you, Hollywood definitely has its more than fair share of spirits. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I bet it does. I bet it does. I mean, and I'm thinking, and these are the people that made it. You always hear about all these other people that would go out to Hollywood, looking for their big break, and they never went anywhere. And a lot of them ended up,
Peg Entwistle.
Yeah. Look at her. She took that big dive off the Hollywood sign.
Exactly.
So
there
was a lot of Peg Entwistles out there. Some of them would go back home and others just didn't. And they ended up in very bad places or died under really bad circumstances. We just don't really know about it because, they never became famous or notorious or whatever. But absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah,
Thank you, Brian.
Hollywood is both a town of dreams and a town of nightmares.
Well, and I think that when it comes to the paranormal, which is what your part of your book relates to, Hollywood a lot was built. It's a lot of like image illusion, that image.
Exactly.
And the flip side of it is like talk about a dark underbelly.
Yeah, and there's definitely a dark underbelly.
Yeah, there's about, what would you say, at least, maybe 100 years of dark underbelly there, more or less?
More than that.
Yeah.
It literally goes all the way back to Thomas Edison trying to monopolize the movie industry.
Really? See, I love that.
Yeah.
I love learning about those things because, there's always the backstory to the backstory. Or the part that never got publicity or nobody, don't talk about that, Let's keep that hush.
Well, that's one of the things I always joke about is the fact that I think I use writing as an excuse to do research.
Yes, I'm a fellow research lover myself, and it's either one, you find omission of the truth, or an outright lie, or like I said. Back then, all these movie moguls, they kind of controlled the newspapers and all these gossip columns, and they kind of controlled that little world as far as what was fed to the public, including, I think, crimes. And sometimes...
there's definitely that.
Well, no, like what we were talking about, sometimes the players or anybody that could have come forward and said, hey, that's not the way it happened, or the person that really did this, they're all dead. Everybody's dead now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So. And
the believe it or not, the mob controlled a lot of it.
Really? Well, you know why? Because, as you can tell, I'm not a big, my research as far as mobs, but, you always think of the mobs like going into like Las Vegas and things like that, and you hear about certain mobsters that were in Hollywood, but you never really think of it as the mob really running it, even though I'm sure they were always doing all the stuff as far as prostitution and things like that. But
well, you had a few of them that were studio heads.
Wow. So you're going to write that book, or is that in one of your books already?
Well, some of it's already in Hollywood Obscura, especially under George Reeves and then Bugsy Siegel. So,
yes.
I kind of touch on it.
George Reeves is another one. That was like, That's
that's another one that I'm kind of iffy on what actually happened.
On what actually happened. It's like take your pick as to who was the one that did it to this guy.
Have you seen a movie called Hollywoodland?
Yes, yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, very, very good movie, and I like the way that they kind of give you all of the different theories without telling you which one they subscribe to.
Right, and when you look at it, you're at the end, you're like, wow, okay, it could have been any of these versions could have applied as to who or how this man ended up dead.
Exactly. Well, George is still at his house and at the Pasadena Playhouse, so
really,
one of these days, hopefully he'll let me know what actually happened. I'm hopeful.
You're hoping to get that breakthrough EVP or like...
Exactly.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much for spending this time with me.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was fantastic. It was great. And we'll be talking, and I'm looking forward to reading your next book for about Universal.
I'm sure you'll enjoy it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
At least I hope so. And if not, blame my wife. Don't ask me how that works, but we'll figure it out.
Bye-bye.
All right, thanks. Bye.
I loved it. And I want to tell you what. Wow, I had a coughing fit there. You know what? I know everybody thinks, excuse me, that Hollywood's been overdone. But as far as anybody that's done the paranormal work, when you look at, I wasn't kidding, when you look at who are usually, everybody knows, okay, people that die violently, traumatic deaths, these are all the reasons why, people end up, becoming ghosts. And in Hollywood, this is what you find over and over again. You come across just people that go out there with all these dreams, becoming a star. A lot of them burn their bridges with their family of origin because, they kind of leave home. Some of them don't. They go, and and the perfect example of this is, I'm sure everybody's seen in the news, all this information that's come out about, the sexual harassment and people that were being basically either going from rape to all these things in the movie industry. And this has come out and it's exploded, and of course, but do you really think that and a lot worse was not taking place way back when people would, when Hollywood started going, when all these studios started setting up? This was around the time that, that term came about, like the casting couch, was because this is how, if you were out there and, you were a star or a starlet or somebody aspiring to go forward, chances are, you had sometimes to make compromises or do things to get ahead. And back then, they had the power to either make you a big star or make sure that you never worked again. So the reason, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these people that would go out there to Hollywood, unfulfilled dreams, things like that, sometimes they are the perfect materials that become ghosts, whether it's like he said, like Peg Entwistle that committed suicide by jumping off the Hollywood sign because she just didn't think she was going to make it. Other people that, they develop problems with drugs or they have love lives that go sideways. And like I said, back then, these studios were really careful to manage the star's personal life as far as what the public was aware of. And then behind the scenes, other things were taking place. Look at what happened with Marilyn Monroe. Even after so many years after her death, there's still conspiracy whether she committed suicide or whether she was killed. All right? And if you look at that, she was successful. She was beautiful. She was, 36 years old when she died. So many things that that you would think that a lot of these people that make it in Hollywood, when I say Hollywood, whether it's the music industry or the movies, and they make all this money, you think, how can anybody be unhappy? But yeah, whether it's because of what's going on with them, people around them, circumstances that happen to them, and this is, like I said, this is the perfect setting for unhappy souls, people that die and they just don't transition on because they still feel something that's binding them to where they lived, where they worked. There's some resolution they never got, despite what he talks about is, and you find a lot of it, it's true what he was saying about when you do research, which is you come across like things that you're like, I didn't know this. All right. Which is, just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it never happened. All right. And you realize that there was a price to be paid for your fame, in other words. And even money would not insulate you from tragedy or from unhappiness. And there you have your active or intelligent haunting. So anyway, guys, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the like button. Follow me on Facebook. Find me on Twitter. I'm live streaming there. You can find this video on YouTube. You can find the podcast of the show on iTunes, on Spreaker, on SoundCloud, on iHeartRadio. If you go to storiesofthesupernatural.info, you will also you can listen to the podcast or download it there as an MP3 file. And like I've said before, my other shows, I'm looking for my true believers. I'm still send me those stories. Film yourself, tape yourself, however you like. Whatever story you want to tell me. If you went out in your backyard and you saw Bigfoot, let me hear about it. Whatever the case might be, I'm ready to listen to your stories. And like I said, whether I retell it or whether I actually use the footage, you can put a note if you want me to exclude names. I don't care. This is not about proving or disproving the story. If it's third hand and it was a friend of a friend or something that happened 25 years ago at a place you used to live, that's fine with me. Just send it to me and I'll take care of the rest. And I really appreciate it. More than anything, I appreciate all the time that you guys spend here looking at the video and listening to the podcast. Take care. Thank you.